Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my YouTube. My name is The Real AE, and today's conversation is about communication. Before we get started, if you do like my content and you do enjoy the conversation in this video, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and definitely share it to 3 of your friends as we are trying to grow this community over to 1,000 subscribers. So let's go and begin. I wanted to have this conversation about communication as I'm noticing that communication is now becoming a dying art, and I want to explain that in 3 different avenues. One is nonverbal communication. 2 is written communication. And number 3, of course, is having verbal conversations. Now, why am I having a discussion with today? Is because I'm starting to notice at 25 years old, I'm starting to realize when you get into this other age or other epsilons of money, whether it's business, whether it's society, you start to realize that people are struggling to even just communicate basic things, whether what they want in life or even what they need or even just, their emotional stances. And also at the same time as well, when it comes to communication, it's very important to be able to convey and communicate your ideas if you ever wanted to, place yourself in a better job role, creating your resume, or even creating content to engage with the audience that you're trying to desire to build. And I'm starting to realize that a lot of people struggle in that avenue. And I had to step away from the creator side because myself, I follow a lot of creators. So every single day I'm consumed with people who are able to articulate those ideas. But once I really step back and view my lens in more of a panoramic way of thinking, I only understood that only like 2 to 3% of your people are creating content, and 97% of people are not creating content. They're rather consuming it. And I think that plays a very big role in how we're able to communicate with each other based off of that. But I'll dive into that in another video if you guys want to. But I want to speak on these 3 different avenues of communication, give you guys my opinion and my perspective, as my goal is not here to motivate. My goal is not here to persuade. My idea is to be able to convey practical and actionable steps that we can do on a day-to-day basis to better our way of life. Because at the end of the day, we are the ones that can control our reality, right? So we can do a better job of communicating. That allows us to stay out of dangerous situations, lower arguments, and be able to have healthy debates, but then also obtain the things that we want in the form of manifestation or attraction. So let's begin. First thing I want to speak on is nonverbal communication. It's our body language. And the thing about nonverbal communication, which is very important, is that it's you. You have to be able to sit down and study you. And I want to say harshly. I would say with detailed orient behind it. And also looking at it from a perspective of that you're wanting to improve. That's what nonverbal communication is going to be about. You have to sit down with yourself and actually analyze what it is. And then find the root cause. You have people who shake their leg, right? You have people who fidget with their hands. You have people who side eye or look away or are bad with eye contact. And I want to use that as an example. When I was younger, I actually had a really bad habit of eye contact. I didn't really like to look at people. And for whatever reason, it was because I was afraid that if my responses hurt the person's feelings, that they would get mad. So I was fearful of making eye contact because I didn't want it to be weird. I didn't want it to be awkward. I didn't want it to be seamless flirtatious. But as time went along, I learned that eye contact was a form of respect. So I eliminated those parameters of what I thought eye contact was. And once I accepted the reality that it's actually a means for respect and that you're actually actively listening to another individual, I worked day in and day out on my eye contact, whether it was my parents, my professors, or my friends. Then eventually it came a lot more comfortable when it came to strangers and meeting new people. But I had to self-analyze that myself. And so for nonverbal communication, such as eye contact, such as hand fidgeting, such as tapping your leg, why do you do these things? They're all stemmed from some kind of reason, whether it's a medical condition, people who have OCD or ADHD or ADD, and they're able to communicate that because of ADHD, they have to fidget their hands, right? Or because they have this medical, disability or this medical issue that they have to tap their leg. But for a lot of us, we are not built with mental deformities. We're not built with hormonal deficiencies where we have to do some of those kind of things. I think people do it unconsciously. So now when you're consciously putting yourself in a position where you're saying, okay, why do I tap my feet? Why do I fidget with my hands? Am I nervous? Am I afraid? Am I scared? Am I aware? Am I not confident? These kind of things allow you to become a better communicator because nonverbal communication is very key in what kind of scenario? Job interviews, going on dates, talking with family, meeting with friends, going to therapy, any kind of environment that involves 2 or more people Nonverbal communication is going to be a key factor in conveying to the other person who's speaking to you, are you actively listening? Is this a topic that makes you, uncomfortable? Is this something that you don't want to be around? You're able to recognize those things because now you're able to not put yourself in positions where you know you're going to act like that. Right? And if you're trying to elevate in life, let's say for a job interview, and you fidget with your hands or you tap your feet, and you're now consciously aware of that, you can then put systems and practices into place where you can eliminate that tendency. So when it's time for you to do that job interview, when it's time for you to go on that date, you are now consciously aware of the things of who you are. So now you cannot be manipulated into acting those things from another party. Because another thing about nonverbal communication and what I've started to realize and what I'm witnessing on the social media front or even in the public front is that people will now use your lack of conscious towards your nonverbal communication techniques, whether it's hand fidgeting, whether it's shaking, and then that person will become to create assumptions in their mind that, oh, when I talk about politics, she gets anxious or he gets anxious, right? So I'm going to sway away from that conversation, but really you being really hand fidgeting, you just fidget your hands because you're really engaged. You fidget your hands because that shows that you're engaged in the conversation, that your mind is actively thinking. But because you're not able to communicate that, and we'll talk about that in verbal communication, but the fact that now you're not able to portray that idea, do you understand how that can be almost misconstrued? It can cause a disagreement or an argument because that person is assuming based off of your body language that you're not interested or that you're nervous, that you're anxious, about how you stand, how your posture is. These are conscious things that you can do on a day-to-day basis to allow for yourself to not put yourself in comfortable positions, also be able to convey your true ideals, and then also allow the other person to understand where you're coming from, whether it's if you're nervous, anxious, confident, strength, etc. And now you're not going to be considered as awkward or weird or insecure or even arrogant or too prideful. Nonverbal communication are these kind of techniques that you can do and study. And I'm going to give you an example of what you can do. This is what I did for eye contact. When it was time for me to get better at eye contact, what I did, and I by the grace of God, I had family that can help me with this. And hopefully you have somebody that can help you practice. Is something that I did was I practiced on Zoom. One thing that I did on Zoom is I called a woman, but he said, hey, can you get on Zoom with me really quick? And I just want to just speak my mind on an idea. It could be sports, it could be anime, it could be whatever. And I want to look at the camera. Just look at it. Just look at the camera. And then I would play back the video and see how many times my eyes diverted. And I critically had to do that because I wanted to gain understanding. So fair warning, if you are going to try this technique or try this practice that I did to get better at eye contact, you have to be able to get understanding and not be afraid to run away from it, right? So that's nonverbal communication. Second piece I want to speak into is written communication. The ability to write is very powerful. That's how people write books. That's how journalists are able to write articles. Coming from somebody who graduated in journalism, I understand that written communication is a very key factor in our day-to-day life because for not too long ago, we only had newspapers, right? We didn't have social media to be able to type. And as the emergence of technology and the advancement of AI and development and technology and be able to convey a message in a short amount of characters, you can start to see that the art form of writing is now becoming more technological than physical. And I will always believe, and I will die on this hill, that you need to be able to write your ideas and write what you're thinking about on a piece of paper, pen in hand. It's skip the fact that you have bad handwriting. And I had a worst case of bad handwriting all the time. But I need you to get away from the fact of your rational fear of your handwriting, because no one else is going to read what you're writing. But be able to get your ideas and thoughts and worries and fears, excitements and joys and anxieties written on a piece of paper not in the form of journaling. Just be able to do what my mom liked to call is a data dump. Your brain is a computer. It's full of software, it's full of hardware, it's full of information. It's full of ideas and it's full of thoughts. And a lot of times your brain can get clouded because there's so many things going on. And now you're not able to execute on the things that you want to do or the things that you have to do, right? So be able to journal and write, whether it's a notebook, whether it's a notepad, being able to physically write with a pen and paper in hand and just write and get these things out of your head. You'll actually that's another form of you telling yourself what you're thinking about? And are you able to commute? Because now when you're writing stuff down and you're writing your ideas out and you're thinking like that, and you read it back to yourself and it's like, man, this doesn't make sense. I can use that as a learning lesson. I can use that as information to go, okay, when I go out in public and I have to convey or persuade or articulate those same kind of ideas to another person besides myself, if it doesn't make sense to me, it's obviously not going to make sense to somebody out there in the real world. This is not going to make sense. And now that's where I believe a lot of disagreements, arguments, debates, hate, whatever you want to call it, starts to run into that problem. Is because I challenge you, when you write your own thoughts and your own ideas down, does it make sense to you? And because then now when you're put in a real life example where you have to explain your idea, how you feel, how your feelings got hurt, and we'll just use relationships as an example. What hurts you? What are your traumas? What is your background? What do you like to do? What are your goals? What are your ambitions? You now get stumbled and you go pause, you go or I don't, and you start looking away, and then those kind of things just shows the lack of confidence. Imagine if you spent writing down on a piece of paper your ambitions, your goals, your ideas, what you're afraid of, what's your traumas, and being able to write them down. And then when you read them back, it makes sense and it's articulated well. I will promise you it will be translated 10 times over in the real world. In public, it'd be very, very effective. I truly believe that the ability to write is something that everybody should do. I remember they took it off of the standardized test because I understand that. But now I also think that writing in today's time is going to be way more powerful for you, because now if you're something as a content creator, you're trying to create stories, you're trying to create arguments on social media like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or even on TikTok, to be able to articulate ideas in written form. And now it makes sense to you when you read it back, when you're sitting in front of a camera like myself and you're able to create these ideas. You now can engage with your audience clearly. It's articulate, there's less confusion. And now if there is some kind of debate, the standard of the argument has to be at the level of your delivery, because now you're able to articulate it very, very well. And I'm not talking about you have to use slang, you have to use your big words. That's not what I'm saying. That's vocabulary. Just being able to speak your mind in a well-mannered form that has a beginning, middle, and end, and so everybody understands, whether they don't like the idea or not. Because your job as a communicator is not to control the reaction of what you just said. Your job as a communicator is to be able to control the truth and the words that formulate out of your mouth. That's what you have control over. So being able to write takes practice as well. You know what's funny for me? I wasn't the best writer all the time. And so what I did to become a better writer is when I grabbed a notebook, I really just scribbled. I just scribbled. It was chicken scratch. It didn't really matter. But getting back into the form of writing, just being able to build the mechanics, build that hand to mind connection, just boom, writing stuff down. Did it make sense? No. But getting used to writing again, because I wasn't writing for a long time. And maybe you haven't written anything down in a long time. I'm talking a long time. Just being able to get back into writing. Just write. And then what I did after that was when I slowed down my writing. I made sure my letters were clear. Did that take more time? Absolutely. But sometimes when you slow down, you'll be surprised how slower your brain goes and you're writing your ideas out. But the key is to write until you lift your pen and lift it off and stop. You might be able to only get down 1 to 2 sentences. But what that does is calms your brain down. Because a lot of times you're thinking about so many ideas rapid fast moving, because that's how your brain operates. It's moving at high speeds. But writing forces the brain to focus and to slow down. And you'll be surprised, you weren't really thinking about anything. It was just a bunch of random noise. When you started to write and slow down, all those thoughts started to forget, and you're only able to focus on, you had a bad day today, or your favorite barista didn't get you coffee, whatever it is. And you'll be surprised how your brain slows that down. And then you'll be like, man, what was I really thinking about? What was I really upset about? And writing has helped me a lot of times deal with my anxieties, my traumas, my fears. It also helped me in developing, plans of action finding out my disciplines, finding out my fears, so I'd be able to grow as a better person. So we started with nonverbal communication and how to get better at that. How written communication is dying, but I think it can definitely improve if you have taken the actionable steps of sitting down and just writing it out. And then lastly, I want to speak on verbal communication. Verbal communication goes in many different roads, so I'm not going to explore all the different avenues. I want to speak on the road of social media specifically in the art of journalism, because that's what I'm confident in. We have to understand, when you're speaking to somebody else or you're speaking to an audience, beginning, middle, and end. One of my biggest problems was I just rambled. There's nothing wrong with rambling or ranting, but there's a time and place for that. But in the art of conversation, in the art of communicating with somebody else or your boss or in a room, you have to have a beginning, middle, and end. What are you going to approach this person to talk about? What's the meat and potatoes, and the close? And that takes practice. Whether it's small talk, whether it's business professionalism, whatever it is, have a beginning, middle, and end. That helps with writing. That helps with nonverbal. Because I'll show you an example. Let's say you approach your boss or you approach your friend and you say, hey, did you watch the game last night? Obviously, you want to discuss about the game. You say, hey, did you watch the game last night? And the person doesn't even spend time to look you in the eyes. They're on the rush. They just look hurried. And they go, yeah, I did. And they're looking away. This is where your nonverbal communication skill needs to come in. It needs to click. And he goes, you know what? Maybe it's not the time to talk about the game. They obviously look busy. They obviously look rushed. And you can't take that personal because you don't know what that other person is going through. And I think a lot of times right now in verbal communication, we don't mean what we actually say. And then we get upset when the body language or the reaction of the person we're talking to doesn't fit the narrative or the story that we already had on our mind before we started the conversation. There was a young woman in a video, for an example. There was a young woman in a video I saw on social media, and she said that I'm deciding to go down the other road. And the male's reaction was, I have to respect that. But then the woman wanted to turn around and say, well, that was the time for you to talk. That was the time for you to fight. That was the time for you to defend. Well, that is a great example of instances, and I'm not saying this is for everybody. That's a great example of an instance where being verbal and communicating exactly what you're trying to convey, you just left it in the beginning. I think I'm going to go decide with other people. Okay, what was left with that? What's the meat? What's the why behind it? But obviously you could see by the male's reaction in that video that was it. Okay, I accept that for what it is. But it didn't, but for the other person or for the communicator at that time, she felt that was supposed to be the conversation starter. And a lot of times it's not. So if you're going to improve on your verbal communication, have the beginning, middle, and end, and set the right intention in your mind, but without the worry or the fear of the reaction. So like I said, let's use the example of, hey, did you see the game last night? And the person looks you in the eye. They show a little bit of excitement. Yeah, I did see the game last night. And you can hear it in the tonality and the volume and the speed of the voice, of the response. That can be a clear sign to you. I can engage further in this conversation. And your best thing to do right there, get to your meat and potatoes. Hey, did you see the game last night? Yeah, man, I did. Did you? Yeah, dude. He's like, yeah, dude, I was just talking to my friends about the fact that CeeDee Lamb is one of the best wide receivers in the country. Boom, that's the meat and potato of the conversation. You wanted to talk about CeeDee Lamb being the best wide receiver in the country, but you introduced it by asking a question. Great, that's fine. There's your beginning and there's your middle. Now, based off of that conversation, you guys can converse on the topic or about the game, like we're using the Cowboys, for example. Now you have the conversation. And then at some point, you got to get to a close. And this is how you can get to a close of a conversation. Closing the conversation can be like this. You notice the environment that you're in. Okay, you're at work. You're probably on the clock. Okay, maybe you need to cut it short because you guys are on the clock. If you're outside of work and you're off the clock, you have to be courteous of somebody else's time. Be courteous of that. Okay, what are we talking about? Does it look like they're in a rush and a hurry? This really forms into nonverbal communication at this point, because now you can see nonverbal cues like someone's turning their body away from you, or their feet are not pointed towards you. They're pointed towards another direction. They keep looking at their keys. They keep fidgeting with whatever to get ready to go, right? They're showing that they're not really engaged anymore. They were engaged for a minute, but now they're showing disengagement. That's a great time for you to close. Great time. Close the convo right there. Using nonverbal communication is a great way for you to know how to end the conversation and leave it open-ended. Maybe leave it for next time, right? If you're obviously going to see this person again, leave it for next time. Or you know that you're going to be closing it because you're not going to see this person again. Maybe it was a one-time encounter. Maybe it was a one-time deal. Maybe you need to close it for next time. Maybe you need to now exchange information, right? So in this video today, I hope you guys will be able to gain some knowledge of communication. And hopefully that you guys understand that in the world of communicating, and it's not that it is becoming a dying art when it comes to social media. People have high tempers. People are upset. People get, with disagreements, things get convoluted. Understand that if you sit down and work on nonverbal communication first and recognize how your body responds to different cues or how you are able to react based off of your emotional states, and so you now can't be manipulated into acting those states by the other person. Then you have in the written communication, how well are you able to articulate ideas when you write them down on paper? Are you able to speak your mind truly when you're writing? Or is it just the fact that your mind is so clouded? Written communication and writing, the art of writing, can now clear the mind to now be able to fill it in with proper information to be able to communicate your feelings and thoughts, etc. like that. And then lastly, in the verbal communication. It takes trial and error. It takes practice. Know your environment. What are you surrounded by? Who are you engaging with? Have that beginning, middle, and end. So now when you're able to communicate, you're able to progress the conversation forward. You're not wasting their time. They're not wasting yours. And now you can have a healthy conversation, whether you like the person or not, whether you have to have a debate or an argument. There's able to come to a conclusion that both parties felt that they were respected, they felt that they were listened to and heard. So now moving forward, you're not hurt, they're not hurt, and you're able to progress every single day. Like I said, guys, my name is The Real AE, and if you've enjoyed this content, go ahead and subscribe. You can comment down below what more topics you would love to see out of myself, because I'm definitely not stopping here. There's a lot of topics on my mind. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. And as always, stay safe, be blessed.